Yeah. So, like you said, my name is Ben McKinney. I am a family medicine physician here in Dallas, Texas. I have been down here for just now 4 years. A few weeks ago, some of the leaders at SCF had reached out to me and talked about about the potential of doing a topic on the idolatry in medicine, idolatry of medicine, overcoming that. What does that look like? And so I feel like it's a really appropriate topic for one in medicine in general. I think it's huge, as I think we'll break down. Hopefully, I'll convince you of as we go through this. But then I also think that it's one that, especially over the last year and a half, has become even more just relevant to what we've been experiencing. And I think it's as we go through here, we'll get to hear a little bit about that. So I'll tell my story. Dan, you go to the next slide. So here's my story. I started out at Baylor for undergrad, went to med school at University of Oklahoma in Oklahoma City there, and then went out to Memphis for residency. It was in my time out in Memphis. This is not the heart of this talk. I'll try to get to the point of it. But I think as I start out, I think it's important to say, like, why should we listen to this guy? Like, what does this guy have to share? Why is he worth listening to? And not because I am great by any means, but because I think I serve a great God that is able to use broken and messed up people like me. You can go back to the previous one. So when I was out in Memphis, in between my first and second year, for the first time, I'd seen doctors that I was willing to, and I longed to be like for the first time. I had seen a lot of great Christian doctors, but they were just good doctors, and they happened to be Christians. And they looked like a good Buddhist doctor, a good Muslim doctor, a good atheist doctor. There wasn't a whole lot of difference. And for the first time I'd seen doctors, I was like, I want to be a father like he is. I want to be a husband like he is. I want to be a part of the community like he is. Someone that is looking at the Bible and saying, my whole life I want it to be like that. And for the first time, like, that is who I want to be. And so it's through my journey of when I first came into med school, I was wanting to do ortho. I loved ortho, bust my butt to be able to do that, made the grades to be able to do that. And all throughout that experience in my time in med school, I feel like I was holding on to that thing. In the end, it's interesting that of all of the specialties that I feel like I would have gone into, family medicine would have been the last one that I thought I was going to go into. When I came into med school, I feel like I was pretty cynical. Didn't like people that didn't take care of themselves. Didn't like people that maybe were obese. I would get frustrated. I would get really cynical. I would be judgmental. That was who I was. I wanted to go and do sports medicine, take care of healthy people that were active and injuring themselves in sports and help them go play sports again. That was my desire. Not that is wrong. It was just, for me, that was where I was at. And I feel like the last thing I would want to do is have no immediate gratification and take care of people's chronic problems. And that is my whole life right now, for the most part, is a lot of chronic problems and a lot of people who are suffering from many disease states that in many ways are preventable. Preventable with lifestyle, preventable with healthy eating, healthy exercise. Not all, a lot of the chronic stuff that I take care of also is unavoidable. But so it's interesting that the road that God's had me on, and I'll go into detail a little bit more, but when I was out, ended up going out to Memphis through a sequence of events. And really my journey has been one of just learning who God is, trying to grow a heart that looks like his, learning to love people like he loves people. Who does God actually reveal himself to be in the Bible? And what does it look like to follow after him? And what are the next steps of obedience in my life? And so for me, it was, okay, what is the next step of obedience today, this year, on my third year rotation, and this next third year rotation? What does that next step of faith look like? And each one of those steps began to take this vision of using medicine to help people and really hone it in on a specific aspect of medicine within family medicine in an inner city underserved setting. Still with a heart for the nations and international, and the way that medicine can get into some of the hardest places in our world, and as an opportunity to tell people about Jesus. But at the same time, I feel like the direction and path for me has been one that's really been honed in an inner city underserved setting. And so when I finished up my time in Memphis, moved down here to Dallas, that right in the middle of that picture there, we have a picture of Dallas, and that is a poverty map of Dallas County. And so green means wealth, red means concentrated poverty. And so that is what kind of led us to searching out Dallas, looking what is going on in Dallas through a sequence of events, kind of came on the radar for us, and then looked into what's going on in Dallas, and started to explore different healthcare opportunities, outreach opportunities, nonprofits that were engaged in caring for the orphan, the underserved, the widow, the poor, the sojourner within the Dallas County area. And through a series of events, ended up leading to a Baylor Scott White City Square Clinic. So that's the front of my clinic taken a few years ago there on the bottom right. And then another opportunity presented itself for us to become faculty for family medicine residency here at Baylor. And now our clinic operates as a continuity clinic site for residents and become faculty for A&M Med School as well. So actually in charge of the family medicine clerkship through A&M. So all of these things have happened, and it's all been, for me, just steps of faith. And I feel like for me, it's looking at the Bible, and it's a talk for another time, but it's saying, what does this actually say? Who does God say he is? And who does he say that I am? And do I actually believe that there is eternity? Do I actually believe that this life is not all that there is, but yet this life is of extreme importance? It's this weird dichotomy that Christians in one hand say there is eternity, there is life after death, there is a resurrection, but at the same time, like, what happens here really matters too, and has eternal consequences. And so in that place of balancing those two things, trying to live my life as if what the Bible actually says is true, that what happens to me doesn't ultimately matter that much, that my own wealth, my own prestige, my own whatever ultimately doesn't really matter, and it's something to be thrown away. And so for us, it's really hard for me as a white male to understand the unique experiences of the predominantly people of color, African American, Hispanic people in South Dallas, where my patients are coming from. And so for us, we made the decision to move into the area. Stan, you can go to the next slide.
Let's see.
So we moved in. That little arrow is right where our clinic is, and right where our house is, just a few minutes south of that. And so we made that decision 4 years ago. And I feel like it's not been easy. It's not been pretty. It's not been sexy, even though at this, it's looked like it or felt like it at the start. It's been hard in a lot of ways, but I think it's been exactly where God has us. And I think we rest in that truth and rest in that peace, raising a family there. And we've had some awesome neighbors, and we've also had some drug dealers on our street. And we also had some Bloods that are right down the street that are gathering at the local community park. And so we have that as well. We have gunshots on a regular basis, not as much now as they used to be, but still there on a regular basis. Like, there's just a reality of what's going on in South Dallas, but there's also amazing, beautiful people that are living all around us too. And so this has been a journey of taking steps of faith and saying, God, what do you have for me? And then just taking that next step and taking that next step. And so that's where I am. And so from that background and from that place, that is where I am kind of coming to you today on this topic of idolatry in medicine. So go to the next slide. Yeah, so here, let me pull up. So the reason I have this picture is that I feel like for the last year and a half, there's been some dark places of our lives, of our culture, of our community, of our country that have been hidden for a while. And I feel like there's something about a pandemic, about something that's beyond anyone's control, something about a unique suffering and trial that the whole world is sharing an experience of right now, that reveals a little bit of that dark side. It reveals that area of our lives that maybe we've held hidden. It reveals some of the hopes that we've had that maybe aren't sustainable, or some of the desires or things that we feel like we need in our life that maybe don't hold up to the weight that we put on them. And so for this quote, I think, is a powerful one from MLK, from Martin Luther King Jr., saying, "Ultimate measure of man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And I feel like it's impossible to like live your life and watch the news or look at any internet site at all and not see crazy amounts of challenge and controversy. Like, turning on the news, you see board meetings are just all out brawls these days. Like moms and dads are filming themselves screaming at people. Like, that's what people are so commonly doing right now. We have courts. We have in Texas, our current legislature, that people fled and didn't even want to have a conversation together, talk through things to prevent something from happening. There's so much controversy and challenge in politics, in schools, in sports, right? We have huge conferences that are making these crazy decisions that are changing the landscape of sports for really forever. We have every aspect of our lives that it feels like there's a lot of controversy in it. So much, if you look on social media, it's just full of pleas from doctors in one way, and then from people advocating and pushing for their freedoms in another way. And there's just like so much controversy. Like, what in the world? What is going on? There is this is a time of significant challenge and controversy. And I feel like it's been very revealing about who we are. And I think I would love if, now that I've kind of set the stage for this, I would love if someone would, talk a little bit about it and look into, take a second, think about where you're at right now after the last year and a half of COVID, and where you're at in your training, where you're at in life in general. And there may be a variety of different experiences you've had, but in one to a few words, how would you describe your current state? Where are you at right now?
I would say busy for us. Just we're seeing our hospital floors to the max and shorthanded. So I feel like that is kind of a present. So there's another version of chaos, I guess, on the hospital floor, because we're seeing things that we're not normally used to be seeing and adapting to it.
Yeah, so busy, chaotic, overwhelming at times. What else? How would y'all describe your current state in a few words or less?
I would say disheartened and hopeful simultaneously.
Yeah.
I think for me, I would say seeking, like I'm in a process still of continually searching or seeking for like how God wants to use me, like in residency, and how he wants me to be interacting with patients and neighbors, and with everything going on in like the culture, and just like what I think through residency, like searching and seeking like what my lane is that he like wants me to run in and serve in. But
okay, Stan, you can go to the next slide. So I put this picture here because I want to propose that we don't realize how much we hold on to something until kind of the ground is taken away from beneath our feet. I think in a lot of ways in medicine, we've been holding on to medicine as our identity, as our meaning, as our purpose, as our delight, or as our hope in a lot of ways. And I would say that in this season of a refining fire of a pandemic, I think it starts to bring out the just the reality that perhaps maybe our hope has been misplaced. Maybe our identity is not in its proper order. And maybe our purpose is not completely wrapped up in being a medical student and being a resident and being a physician, that perhaps we've been holding on to something that was not meant to be held as tightly, and to be our savior, and to be the thing that sets us free when we're falling, when our med school, again, if you're in a med school and you go virtual for the whole year and you can't meet up and you can't gather and there's all these pressures and you're like, what is going on? The rug has been taken off underneath my feet again, and I don't know what to hold on to. And I would argue that oftentimes we look to our jobs, our careers, and medicine in general to be that thing that we hold on to. Going to the next slide, Sam. So when you think about the concept of idolatry, it's something that is innately religious. Like there's not really a way around it other than to say like it has so much of a religious background to it. There is no, like, perhaps when you think about idolatry, you think about a little idol, a statue, perhaps in Hinduism and India, of idol worship and that kind of thing, of like these small images of representing a god, representing something to worship that is man-made, but represents something else. It's interesting when I look at the background of idol, coming from a French idol, I'm not going to pronounce it right, and then Greek eidolon. The word and the definition of that I found to be really interesting was a reflection in a mirror or water. And that description of that root word in Greek, I think, is really telling for what an idol really is. And it's not just seeing ourselves in that reflection, it's seeing something. Imagine looking down at a water and there's ripples going through the water. And in the background, in the distance, you see a mountain peak. But what you see is just a part of it. And you see just a little hint of it. And it's kind of blurry and you can't really see the whole thing. But then you become so infatuated by that reflection that you fail to even look at the real thing. It's like looking in a mirror that you can't really see what's going on, and it looks like there's a fruit or some food that looks really tasty in the mirror, and you're looking at it and you're saying, man, that reflection looks really good. I want to know more about that reflection. I want to know more about that thing. And you fail to see that there is the real thing right next to you. That an idol is that thing that it's a reflection, it's a substitute, it's a poor reflection. It's a phantom in some ways of that thing that we are greatly admiring, we're loving, we're revering, we're worshiping. That's other than the real thing. Another way of describing idolatry is craving, wanting, enjoying, being satisfied by anything that you treasure more than God. Anything you seek to give you that only God can give, or a disordered love. So this idea of oftentimes we don't fall for things that aren't really good. We tend to elevate things that have some good in them. We elevate family, and family becomes our ultimate identity and purpose. We elevate a good job like medicine, but it becomes our ultimate satisfaction and identity. We elevate food or sex. Those things bring pleasure and taste and are good, but we elevate them to be the ultimate thing that we should pursue, that our identity is solely wrapped up in that sexual craving or desire, that our identity is solely wrapped up in the type of food that we eat. There's so many different things that we can elevate and place as the most important thing in our life. You can go to the next slide. So here's the thing. There's only such thing as idolatry if there is a God, right? If there's no God, then this whole concept, this whole talk is meaningless. Because if there's not the real thing, then the image of it is all we've got. So if we're all just, from a naturalistic perspective, just a random sequence of events of atoms hitting one another and happening to produce what we see here, that everything we see is just man-made, and it's fake. It's all a reflection, and there is no real thing. So then the whole point of this talk is worthless, because there's no better thing. So we might as well just try to make the most of these substitutes that we have right here, because there is no real image. The reality is, like, if there is not a God, then none of this matters. Then the love we've created means nothing. It's just a man-made thing to make us feel better. Then the relationships, then life in and of itself, then all the things that are causes really mean nothing. We tell people they ought to do something or they ought to do something, but if there's no God, if there's no right and wrong, if there's no truth, then no one ought to do anything. We can live however we want, and who cares if we find our identity in medicine then? Why does it even matter, right? But the reality is, there is a God. Like, there is a good God, and it only matters because an all-knowing, all-powerful God who created you and me with a specific identity and specific purpose said that idolatry matters. So here's the thing. If there was no God, or if that God was not truly worthy of our worship, or if he didn't create us with specific identity or purpose, and if that purpose wasn't wrapped up in foundationally worshiping him above all else, and that wasn't for our good, then this whole talk again is meaningless. But we live in a reality that there is a God, that he's a personal God, that he is a creator God, that created us with an identity to be his sons and daughters. He created us as empty vessels to be filled with him, to find our identity and worth in what he tells us we are. And that when we return that praise and worship to him, that is when we are most fulfilled. That is when we find and experience the truest version of ourselves. That's why it matters. And also, this is going to be a hard thing, there's consequences. We don't like to talk about a reality of consequences or hell. We don't like to talk about those things. We want to have a little happy, free life. Everyone do what you want to do. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. But here's the thing. The Bible is very clear that there's right and wrong, and that there's heaven and hell. Jesus talked a whole lot about that. So you can't really say you're a Christian and say you follow Jesus and not believe in these things that he talked about. It doesn't work like that. So here's the thing, and many, even if you're not a Christian, can look at these two tablets and say, oh yeah, that's the 10 commandments. What does that mean to me? Well, here's the thing. God says he chose a group of people and said, you're my people. And I'm going to tell you, here's how you're supposed to live your life. And it's for your best. And that's what we have to come back to in this whole idolatry thing, is that God created us and he told us what's for our best. And so the first two commandments on those tablets was having no other God before him and to not make an idol. They both are wrapped up in this concept that we should worship him alone and nothing else should come in his place. And he is the most important thing in our lives. And then after that second command, he says why? He says, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. I'm like, what? Jealous? How could God be jealous? Jealous kind of makes me think of insecure, makes me think of a little bit needy, right? Like a jealous girlfriend. If you think about that, you have something in your mind that comes up that she's like always nagging, she's always insecure. A jealous boyfriend like doesn't want his girlfriend talking to any guy ever because he's like, oh no, she'll leave me, she doesn't love me. It's just really insecure, right? So like if you think about, wait, how could God be jealous? Is God so insecure and needy? But here's the thing, if he wasn't perfect and if he wasn't the fullness of love, then he would be needy and he would be insecure. But the truth is he is perfectly righteous, perfectly holy. He is perfect in every way. And he is the fullness of love. And so in his jealousy, it's actually for our good. He has created us in such a way that when we don't walk according to his commands, bad things happen, both here and now and for eternity. Our lives don't experience the fullness of joy and hope and peace that he has offered us. And so his jealousy is actually for our good. He longs for us to have our affections in him, because he is good and he is worth it. Later in the New Testament in Romans, Paul is writing to the church in Rome, and he describes the wrath of God coming on account of idolatry. Like the wrath of God. That's crazy. Like we don't like to think about that. We don't want to tell our non-Christian friends, we want to tell our classmates that there's such a thing as a wrath of God. But here's the thing, if no one believes they need to be saved from anything, then why would they ever want to be saved? If everyone thinks everything is good, why do they need anything else? If everyone thinks that they can just live their lives without consequences, then why would they ever need someone to make things right? If everything is as good and our hope is in medicine or society or politics or government to solve our problems, then why would we ever look to anything else? I saw a quote from Tim Keller the other day that I thought was really relevant to this concept. It said, if there is no day of judgment to account for all the wrongs of the world that people have gotten away with, what hope is there for the world? But if there is a day of judgment, what hope is there for me? Jesus is our answer to both questions. So here's the thing. It's beyond the scope of this talk, but I believe there is a God. He created us with a true identity and purpose. He gave us commands to help us walk in that identity and purpose for our good. And that when we don't, there's consequences. And one of the main commands is not to worship anything other than him. So to answer my own self-proposed question, why does it matter? This is why it matters. And so I hope that as I go through this, you can go to the next slide, Stan. Like, this is kind of heavy, right? Like, Ben, why came to this Christian talk to be uplifted? This pandemic is hard enough. Are you talking about consequences and wrath of God and hell? Like, these are awful. But like, if that's all it was, then this would be hopeless. And Christianity would be hopeless. But the beautiful thing is that there is the most amazing hope, and that a relationship with God is possible, and that it's so worth it. Because there is that real thing, that settling for this false image of something, this false reflection that never satisfies and never fulfills, there is the better thing that does satisfy and fulfill. So maybe you're sitting here like, Ben, that all sounds great. You sound really passionate and all, but I don't think I make an idol of medicine. So I got these questions to have you to start thinking through. Maybe you do. So maybe you make an idol of medicine. What do you do when you get a bad grade? What do you turn to in those moments? For me, it would be turning to athletic achievements. It would be turning to achievements in another place. It would be going and playing golf and trying to win. It would be going and maybe drinking, going out with friends and having fun and escaping, right? So like all of a sudden, this thing isn't my identity anymore. I don't find fulfillment in this thing because I failed. So therefore, I have to either escape that or dull that and go find something else that can feed me. What is your motivation for success in med school? Like, why do you care so much about the grades you get? Is it for other people to see how good you do? Is it for other people to know what specialty you're going into? For other people to know what you got on your boards? For other people to know what new committee you're part of in the hospital? For other people to know your chief resident? for other people? Like what's your motivation for success in medicine? Do you regularly thank God for medicine working for a patient or for parts of your body working? How often have you sat there as you're learning these medicines or as you're giving these medicines out, as you're doing a surgical procedure, do you constantly thank God that, hey, when you put those bones back together, you don't fix them. The body then fixes itself, right? An orthopedic surgeon does not put the bones together. They put them next to each other and then the bones heal themselves. Isn't that remarkable? Like that might be offensive to some, but like, a vascular surgeon puts the vessels back together, but not perfectly, not on a microscopic cellular level, but yet somehow those things grow back together, right? Like God has created our bodies in amazing ways. Do we praise him and thank him for that medicine working, for those discoveries? Here's one that I thought was convicting. How many of you have ever felt uncomfortable or rolled your eyes when patients go on and on thanking God for something that happened or for them getting better, when you're like, well, it was really just this medicine? Or I don't know why you're thanking God for this thing. Did you not know how much work I put into it? Did you not see what that surgeon did? Why is this patient makes me uncomfortable? Because they're always thanking God for things that clearly God didn't do. God didn't do anything. He wasn't in the operating room, right? Has anyone else ever thought that? Has anyone else ever been uncomfortable? There's a lot of no faces on here. So I'm gonna appreciate that you guys are nodding and all smiling and agreeing with me. And I'm just gonna keep going with it. All right, next slide. Here's some more. Would you struggle with your identity? Would you struggle with your identity if you couldn't say, I'm a doctor? What happens if something happened, you didn't finish med school, or you can no longer practice medicine? Would you struggle and just flounder and feel like you're drowning and trying, who am I? What am I doing in this world if I can't help people with medicine? Do you find yourself at the beginning of this pandemic, maybe like 9 months ago, 10 months ago, when the vaccine was coming out, did you put all of your trust in that vaccine fixing everything? Did you find yourself saying, thank goodness there's finally a vaccine. Now my life can be better again. Now everything can be happy again. Now I can go back to living my life like it was before, right? How often I heard so many Christians when they asked, what are you hopeful for in 2021, was, I'm hopeful for a vaccine fixing everything. That was the hope. The hope was not in God. The hope was not in learning more about who they are and who God is. The hope was not in overcoming or persevering. The hope was not in the beauty of who God, the hope was in the vaccine. And I'm not here to say I'm an anti-vaxxer by any means. My statement is just, perhaps we're putting our trust and hope in man-made things and not in the God who gives us the insight and wisdom and knowledge, or not in the God who created everything. Have you found yourself saying, if you get a bad review from a resident or faculty for a med student, or for me, from a patient that gives me they all review now, right? Every patient gets a survey at the end of their visit. So if I get a bad review, do you struggle with who you are? You struggle with what am I even doing here? This is what the thanks I get? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself if the Bible speaks to a specific topic that your medical training just taught on? Has your medical training ever taught on a reality of the psychology of a mind, or of the purpose, or of what is good, and said, oh, this is what it means. Self-determination is the ultimate. Letting the patient self-determine is their ultimate reality. And as long as they can say who they are, who they want to be, who they love, what gender they are, what they want to do with their lives, whatever they want, who they want to kill, if even they want to kill themselves, let's be physicians that let them kill themselves and help kill them, because that is good medicine, because self-determination is the ultimate reality. That's what's being proposed right now. That's what's being pushed from our medical society in our country. That all across the country, in every area of our lives, that is the ultimate thing. Have we ever stopped and said, wait, whoa, what does the Bible actually say? Is there a greater truth than maybe what medicine is saying? Is there something that's a deeper reality than this? So I'm gonna share a little bit of my own story. So when I was in med school, I remember I lived with my cousin for a couple of years, the first 2 years of med school. And I remember there was it was 2 nights before test, but the next is a big final. The next day I had all of these things that I had to do up at school and other tasks and things. So I knew I was gonna have limited time studying. I was done studying, so I went to bed early. It was on a Thursday night, or it was on a Wednesday night, and the test was on a Friday morning, something along those lines. He comes in late at night, group of people over at our house are making tons of noise. I'm getting there angry, irritable, right? My identity is in how well I do on this test. Now, you could argue maybe it's not considerate of him. You could argue that maybe he needs to be more aware. Maybe I should. But I went out and instead of communicating well and expressing, I let that anger boil up, because if my test does not go well, my identity is shook, because I have idolized medicine and my role is being really good at medicine above everything else. And so all of a sudden I go out there and I yell, I get mad, I get angry, and then I hurt that relationship with someone. I allow medicine to be so elevated that I'm willing to elevate medicine higher than a relationship right in front of me. That human being that's sitting across me, that God says, I created him in my own image. I died for him. I'm interceding for him. And all of a sudden I said, you know what? Medicine is more important than that guy. Or I remember one time I got a solid score on a test. It was actually a 90. So it's an A, right? But the average of that score for my classmates was a 92. And so I was mad. It was not that I did bad, but I was mad because it wasn't just about doing good. It was about doing better than the other people. It wasn't just about having success. It was about having more success than everyone else. So I'm extremely competitive. So maybe this doesn't resonate with you, but I would argue that I'm sure many of you have had that same experience, that if you do a little bit worse, but yet the average is bad on a test, you're like, oh, I'm okay. But if the average is better and you do worse, you get mad because you're competitive. It's all about doing better than the other people. It's not about how can I learn this information and study it to the point of glorifying God with every aspect of my life. It's about something else. I remember walking out of the OR my third year, getting complimented on silly little basic suturing and feeling like I was on top of the world. Like, oh my gosh, I just saved a life, right? Like, what in the world? Like, how do I have so much pride and arrogance over something so minuscule as doing suturing or tying knots in the operating room? Like, I remember when I was talking about what specialty I wanted to go into in residency, or when I was in med school, and people would ask, oh, Ben, what are you going to do? I was like, oh, I'm thinking like ortho, I really love that. And then would throw out like, but I really love surgery and medicine. So I might do some kind of surgery, other surgery, do a fellowship through that. But, or, maybe, I'm still thinking about kind of like family medicine. And I'd always phrase it in such a way that I elevated these other things with more prestige. And then I would throw in family medicine at the end of it, because I knew what people perceived family medicine to be. And I didn't want to be lumped into that. I didn't want to be at OU, and our med school people viewed family medicine as the bottom of the totem pole. And I did not like that. And I didn't want anyone to put me there. And so because I idolized prestige and being approved of my fellow man and letting them know, oh, I could do ortho. I want you to know I could do it. So I would say that. And it's not that it's wrong to do any of those specialties that are more competitive. I hope you don't hear me say that. But I'm just saying that maybe our motivations I'm giving examples for me of like how it was revealed to me that I was idolizing the approval of man, of success, of prestige. These things were important to me. I remember in residency priding myself in how much I worked. And I would always tell people how much I worked. Maybe in med school was how much you studied. Oh, how much did you study for that test? Oh, I studied 12 hours yesterday. Like, you always want to brag about it. Why does it matter? Why is that our tendency to brag about how much we work or how much we study? Because we want to be known as someone that works hard. And not that hard work is a bad thing. We should be working hard. But our identity becomes in being that doctor that's willing to sacrifice everything else to do medicine. Because medicine is the ultimate. We want people to know that I sacrifice all my relationships to study. Why is that something that we want to tell people and brag about? But I heard it so often in med school, and I experienced it in my own life in residency, that we want to brag about how you go to different residencies that have crazy long work hours. Like, oh yeah, we work so hard. It's like, that's a bragging point across all residencies. We're like, it's crazy. All right. Any thoughts? I just talked for a long time. Any thoughts that you guys have so far at this point? It's gonna have some hope here at the end, hopefully.
Dr. McKinney, what would you say to somebody who does catch themselves struggling with pride and a lot of the things you just talked about? What's a good way practical way to start changing that?
Perfect. That segues really nicely into my final slide of this talk. That's good. Hold that thought for a second. Any other thoughts, questions? All right, Stan, you can go to the next slide. So I don't know who this guy is. I feel bad if this is a real person, but this was when I looked up God complex in medicine, this was the guy who came up on Google. So he looks like a very suave, good looking man. But he's got that, the lights coming from behind him. There's a reason that we think of the God complex in medicine so often. Because honestly, one of the biggest things we make idols of is ourselves. And at the end of the day, it's all about us. That's what led to sin in the beginning of this whole world, is that we think we know what's best. We think we know what better than God. And even today we say, you know what? I don't really care about just loving that person. I want them to appreciate my love, how much I'm doing for them. I'm not just doing this to help someone. I want people to know that I'm helping people. And there's something about medicine that feeds this pride and this self-idolization. There's money, there's fame, there's prestige, there's all the things that come with it, right? If you go into the doctor's parking of every hospital, look at the cars. Like, there's such sweet cars everywhere. I mean, there's something that's appealing about that. There's a reason that all the doctors drive those cars, because they're sweet. And there's a reason why it sucks you in, because they're cool and fast. And they've got all the gadgets, right? Like, there's a reason why, like, you go to doctor's houses, they're big. And I'm not saying it's innately sinful to have a nicer car, to have a bigger house. Again, don't hear me say that. But I'm just saying that it's easy to get sucked into that becomes our ultimate pursuit. I remember just recently at Baylor, there's been such an overflow of work at the urgent cares that they were like, hey, we're reaching out to family medicine docs, come and work at the Baylor urgent care. We'll pay you extra. It'll be $150 an hour. I'm like, oh, I'm already working too much. I'm trying to say no in my life to some other things, but you know what? $150 an hour, that's appealing. Maybe I should work on a Saturday and Sunday. Like, all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I'm already feeling like I don't have enough time to love my wife and kids well. And yet I'm all of a sudden sucked into more money. Like, for what? I have more than I could ever need right now, right? Like, I'm a family medicine doctor. So at the whole financial rating system, I'm down here, but yet I have more than I could ever need. So much more. And yet I still find myself getting sucked into just wanting a little more money, a little bit more money. For what end? I don't know. I have no idea, because I have everything I could ever need right now. All right, next slide, Stan. All right, you can click through click twice. So this is from the poem literature, the poetic literature of the Psalms. The question is, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. From where does my help come from? And the end of this psalm is actually, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. But I feel like not only do we idolize medicine as our identity, but we idolize medicine as the thing we look to as well. And I talked about this earlier. I mean, we look to the pills to fix all of our problems as a society. And as doctors, oftentimes patients come in struggling with true addiction and true realities. And we say, like, you know what, here's this pill, maybe that'll fix all of your problems. We looked at pharmaceuticals and vaccines to fix all of our problems. In medicine's work, antidepressants have a role. Vaccines are very effective. But I'm just saying, where's our ultimate hope in? Is our ultimate hope in God, or is our ultimate hope in pharmaceuticals, in medicine? You can go to the next slide. All right, so what's the cure? I think it was you, Kyle, that said, what do we do about this? We see this pride, we see this element of like craving this, so what do we do? It all comes back to that, you picture that early image of that mirror and that reflection. We have to turn our eyes off of that thing we've been looking at and turn our eyes on the real thing. And we have to recognize our identity. We have to rest in that relationship. So let me break that down. So when someone's addicted to smoking, right? And you don't just tell them stop smoking. You tell them, hey, those times in your life when you really want to smoke, is it right when you wake up in the morning? Is when you have that morning cup of coffee? So what do you do in that moment? You need to replace that behavior with something else. You need to do something else that fills that void. So if we just say, I'm just going to really commit to not being prideful or not caring what other people think, it doesn't work. What we have to do is replace it, but not just replace it with a other substitute of like, oh, I'm not going to be addicted to alcohol anymore. So now I'm going to be addicted to gambling. Or now I'm going to be addicted to work, right? I'm going to be a workaholic. And now I'm going to, like, it's not replacing it with something else. It's replacing it with the best and most worthwhile thing there is. It's God. It's finding him. It's resting in him. The concept of Sabbath is something that I'm really trying to understand and learn more about in my life. There's a reason God made it. The Jews could have had more conquests, could have had more victories, could have done and created more in their civilization in that extra day. But God said, no, rest, and I'm going to provide for you. I will be enough. Just trust me, because I'm the one that's working. You can toil and do all these things, but it's never going to be enough in and of yourselves. You have to trust me. So as doctors and in medicine, I think we need to practice rest better. We need to say no to studying more sometimes. Like, we need to say no to going and being a part of another committee if we're doctors, if we're physicians and practicing. We need to say no to some things to say yes to God. So many times we feel like God doesn't speak, God is silent, God's dead. Maybe we just haven't spent enough time listening to God and creating space in our life where we can hear from him. We need to behold him for who he truly is. So often atheists and Christians alike don't even know who the real God is. We've created this God in our head that we can like mold and shape, and now becomes this our own creation. But one of the things is like our ultimate heart is restless. Augustine in Confessions, right? He said our heart is restless until it finds rest in you, God. Like, we're constantly searching for that thing to give us rest until we finally rest in God. We don't understand that, oh, I don't have to find my identity in working really hard, in making a lot of money, of pleasing everyone. God has said, I'm his son. So why do I care about what other people think? How do I wake up in the morning and thank God and acknowledge him in my life for who he's made me to be? Oh my goodness, if I now think that I am God's son, when I mess up at work and I make a mistake, it's not the end of the day. I learn from it, and now it doesn't destroy me. If a patient doesn't like me, I'm not serving them with medicine for their affirmation. I'm doing it to try to be faithful to God. And sometimes we make mistakes. We have to acknowledge failure in this life. It's hard, and we just grow from it. We need that truer, deeper identity of who we are in God, so we don't constantly try to find it in the affirmation and praise of other people. Like, I think that at the end of the day, it has to be beholding God, making time to see him in scripture, reading the Bible. So many med students I've had come through A&M that we talk about a topic of our culture of our day, and I ask them what their thoughts are on it, and they begin to share things. And I said, have you ever, like, you say you're a Christian, have you ever read what the Bible actually says about this? And like, oh, no. I'm like, wait, you say you believe like the God of the Bible, and you say you identify yourself as one that follows Jesus, but have you actually heard what he says on this specific topic? No. What's off here? How did we get so far away from truth? How did we stop just being consumed with what society and the world tells us? We never stop to say, what does the Bible actually say? What is God actually speaking to me right now? God is living and active. His word is in the Bible, and then also his Holy Spirit is in this world. And he speaks to us. There's a real relationship there that if you seek him, you will find him. So that's my encouragement. That's what I would say is the recipe to getting over that. Kyle is coming back to that identity and beholding and loving God, right? Like, the command, the active version of don't have any other idols or don't serve any other gods, is to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love other people as your neighbors, or love your neighbor as yourself, right? Like, those are the active versions of that. And until we do those and pursue those with all that is in us, we're going to constantly be coming back to it. And then honestly, when you see that area of pride, confess it and turn from it. Invite other people into your life to say, hey, what do you see in me? I feel like this is the residency I'm wanting to go into, but would you speak into my life? What do you think? These are my reasonings. What do you say to that? Does this seem like it's in line with who God has called us to be or not? Hey, this is the job I'm wanting to take. Does this seem like it's in line or not? So I think that would be my encouragement. Invite other people to speak into you. Allow God to speak into it through his word and through prayer, and then to rest in him and rest in that identity of who he's created you to be. So that's all I got. The last slide is just my family. There they are. They're so great. The little girl at the bottom is actually a girl. Her hair is longer now. She looks very cute. And then Judah's 5 months old, and then Abby up there is just turned 5. So I wouldn't be where I am without them. So I always like to give them a shout out, because I'm so thankful for Emily and for my wife and for how she's supported me and come alongside, and all of the crazy things that we've done as a family. I would not be able to do this without her. So constantly grateful and thankful for her and how God has brought me a beautiful wife that is amazing. So, all right, that's all I got. Any thoughts, questions that y'all might have? All right. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Dan, for having me. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much. This was extremely thought-provoking, hopefully for our students. And yeah. Hey, Jess. Kyle, would you like to close us in prayer?
I'd love to. All right, if you guys would bow your heads with me. Dear Lord, just thank you for this day. Thank you for a day that you did not promise us, but a day that was given to us. And I pray that we get to use it as a gift rather than just another day. Thank you for Dr. McKinney. Thank you for speaking through him and really putting words on all of our hearts that we all needed to hear, Lord. And so I pray if we say that we follow God, we say that we follow you, that we would just put that into action every day. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks.